They say that a God unseen is no God at all, that divinity breathes only in the gaze of the worshipper, and so begins the observer's paradox. Breathe in the hush of expectation, for here, existence depends on attention. Imagine a vast canvas of potential and empty sky, waiting for a star to be named. In that silence, the divine slumbers, indistinct as mist at dawn. But the moment eyes turn upward, the God awakens. In quantum halls of thought, they speak of Schrödinger's cat, neither alive nor dead until the box is opened. So too, this God is neither present nor absent until our sight collapses the infinite possibilities into being. Feel the tremor of that collapse, a universe birthing itself in each glance. Across cultures, sages whispered, "Speak my name, and I shall be yours." Yet, speak it too softly, and the echo fades. The deity retreats into the hidden realm. The paradox binds believer and divine in a dance of mutual dependency. Your faith calls the God into being. The God, in turn, grants your faith its meaning. Sense the rhythm of that dance, a heartbeat shared by two worlds. In quiet chapels, candles burn brightest when eyes are fixed upon their flames. A priest's prayer hangs in the air active, charged, but when footsteps leave the nave, the sacred hush unravels. Walls resonate no more. The God drifts away. Yet in this fragile contract lies profound power, for if attention can conjure the divine, then doubt can dissolve it. Hear the chill of disbelief, a breeze that scatters embers into darkness. Scientists and theologians alike ponder the truth. Is the divine a cosmic projector, its image cast upon the screen of consciousness? Or is the projector itself a mirror, reflecting our own longing for meaning back at us? Reflect on your own gaze, the quiet flame that kindles when you look for something greater. They call this phenomenon the observer's effect. In observing, we change the thing observed. Our belief folds reality upon itself, weaving God from the threads of our own attention. Feel the weave beneath your fingers, the tapestry of awareness and awe. But beware, to tie a God to your sight is also to bind yourself. Your deity lives and dies with your focus, a captive of your doubt, a prisoner of your gaze. Let that truth settle, like dew on your skin, a reminder that existence can be as fleeting as thought. And so, at the heart of all worship and wonder lies a question. Do we summon the divine, or does the divine summon us? Hold the question like a breath, and step forward into the realm where belief and being entwine. They whispered of a God who lingers on the edge of sight, a spirit born not of birth, but of attention. And so the watching deity took form. Feel the stir of memory in the air, an echo from ancient courts and open-air theaters. In the bustling plazas of Karnak, priests raised spectacles of gold before the sun-drenched colonnades, projecting images of Amun-Ra onto painted walls. But when the crowds departed, the painted god lay dormant, a hollow echo of daylight. Along the winding banks of the Ganges, ascetics stood before silent shrines, eyes fixed upon flickering oil lamps, their unblinking gaze summoning Shiva into focus. But blink, and Shiva's form dissolved back into the aether. Sense the shifting sands of belief, how gods rose and fell as eyes came and went. In the amphitheaters of ancient Greece, actors donned masks of Dionysus and Athena, their performance an act of worship, each cheer a call, each gasp a breath. Between the proscenium stones, the god awoke alive in the collective roar, vanished in the hush that followed the curtain's fall. On remote Pacific isles, villagers painted the eyes of their deities round, vigilant circles that watched over hearth and field. They believed the painted gaze itself held the god at bay. Erase the eyes, and the deity fled into myth. Hear the paintbrushes whisper, the fragile line between image and presence. In medieval Europe, stained glass windows told tales of Christ's compassion, colored light casting his visage onto cold stone floors. Pilgrims knelt beneath that kaleidoscope glow, calling him forth with every step. But in empty cathedrals, the colors dulled. The Savior retreated into silence. Yet even in the hush of abandonment, a fragment remained. A memory shimmering in dust motes, a promise that return was but a breath away. In Asia's hidden sects, the Vairocana Buddha was said to manifest only when summoned by sevenfold chants. In silence, he dissolved into the void between syllables. Monks guarded the sequence like sacred code. One misplaced pause, and the god faded. Feel the weight of each breath, the fragile geometry of ritual and belief. Through myth and miracle, one truth emerged. The watching deity thrives on focus. Each worshipper's glance a thread, weaving the god into existence. Each diverted eye a tear threatening to unravel the tapestry. But why did humans craft such a god? Perhaps to exercise power over the unknowable, to tame mystery with ceremony and gaze, or to glimpse in the divine a mirror of their own longing. Reflect on your own rituals, the prayers spoken in darkness, the silent wishes cast upon candles. For as long as we watch, the god endures. As long as we turn away, the god dissolves. This origin story is not of divine decree, but of human need, a craving for presence in the vast unknown. Let that need echo in your mind, a question that beckons you deeper. And beyond these origins lies the quantum mirror, where observation itself becomes sacrament, and the line between watcher and watched dissolves in a blaze of possibility. They speak of worlds unseen, of possibilities draped over reality like mist. And at the heart of this lies the quantum mirror. Breathe in the hush of atoms unobserved. In the lab's silent chamber, particles dance in superposition, neither here nor there, neither life nor death, until a measuring eye descends and collapses their myriad paths into one. Imagine a photon gliding through twin slits, its essence a wave of potential, yet the instant you peer, a single mark appears on the screen, proof that your gaze chose its fate. Feel the weight of that choice, your observation as creator. They liken the quantum to the sacred, a god suspended between worship and oblivion, present only when probed by the faithful instrument and gone the moment the gaze falters. In whispered experiments, scientists note the observer effect, a solenoid coil whose spin shifts beneath the eye of the spectrometer, a quark spin dancing differently when its state is known. Sense the thrill of that dance, a deity born in measurement. Some mystics see in this the ultimate metaphor, God as wave function, endless possibility, reduced to form only when witnessed by consciousness. They speak of scripture written in indeterminate ink, verses that exist only as thought, becoming real when read, fading when forgotten. Reflect on your own thoughts, how focus gives them weight. Beyond the lab, the metaphor blooms. A reformer stands beneath torchlight, daring to question doctrine. The masses turn their eyes, and a new God emerges, bold, clarified, manifest. Yet turn away, and doctrine crumbles, words etched on air. In digital realms, algorithms watch our clicks, shaping news feeds, sculpting beliefs, our collective gaze summoning truths into being. Hear the hum of servers. Our attention has altered. Thus, the quantum mirror reveals a startling truth. Observation is not passive. It entangles observer and observed, binding both in a singular event of creation. Feel the echo of that entanglement, a thread linking you to every moment you witness. And so we ask, is faith itself an experiment? Does each prayer collapse divine potential into a single answer? Does each doubt erase a God from the spectrum of possibility? Hold that question in the silence, for within it lies the power to awaken, or to let extinguish, the God that only exists when watched. They say that the God slumbers like a seed beneath the earth, untouched by sight, unfed by worship, until a gesture breathes life into the hidden spark. Breathe in the hush before ceremony begins. In a moonlit courtyard, devotees stand in silent circles, hands cupped as if holding a flame that dares not flicker. Their eyes lowered, they chant a single name drawn out in low reverence, echoing off pavilion walls like a heartbeat in the void. A breath, and the name hangs in the air vibrating, pregnant with promise. Then eyes lift, gaze meets gaze, and the God stirs. Feel the tremor of collective intent. Across deserts, Bedouin tribes gather at dusk, drawing intricate circles in sand. With each line traced by trembling fingers, they carve the God's image, a constellation of dots and lines that glows in phosphorescent dust. When the final stroke is drawn, torches flare to life, illuminating the pattern in molten gold. And in that golden sigil, the deity finds form, emerging from emptiness, as if born anew from starlight. Sense the crackle of divine ignition. In Himalayan caves, yogis sit for days without movement, eyes fixed upon a single point on the cave wall. They bring their breathing to a slow drumbeat. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 8. Each cycle a mantra, each inhale an invocation, each exhale a release of all that distracts. Feel the cadence of sacred breath. As their breath aligns, the cave's shadows begin to shift, carving shapes in rock that mirror the God's form, a silhouette born of stillness and devotion. In medieval monasteries, monks performed the circle of witness, a procession around hallowed halls, singing psalms in canon. One voice begins, another joins then, another, until 1,000 voices rise and fall in perfect unity. When the final note fades, silence deepens. In that sacred pause, the godlike waverizes and breaks, filling every nave and cell with trembling presence. Hear the echo of voices departed. In modern sanctuaries of glass and steel, worshippers light candles in glass jars, each flame a pixel in a vast digital mosaic displayed on screens. Names and prayers scroll below typed in haste, sent in hope. Eyes flicker between flickering lights and scrolling text, their focused attention weaving the God into cyberspace alive in data, fed by clicks, sustained by streams of consciousness. Feel the hum of the network. Pilgrims today download guided visualization apps, listening to whispered prompts, visualize the form, call its name, feel its pulse. Headphones become altars, smartphone screens, stained glass windows. And when the guidance ends, many swear they felt a presence, a warmth behind their closed eyes, a voice just beyond hearing. Sense the boundary between mind and divine. Across every ritual, one truth holds. Attention is the sacrament. Focus, the vessel. Each gesture, word, breath, gaze serves as a key, unlocking a door that only ritual can reveal. Yet the ritual is also a test. Too little focus, and the God remains latent, a shadow at the edge of sight. Too much, and the self dissolves, a danger that the worshiper becomes lost in the divine mirror. Feel the knife edge of devotion. Rituals of focus are a covenant. We summon the God with our presence, and in return, the God shapes our presence into something more. In that shaping lies both power and peril, for a God born of attention can vanish at the slightest doubt, leaving the believer adrift in an echoing emptiness. Breathe in the weight of that promise, and know, every act of worship is also an act of creation, each prayer a brushstroke on the canvas of reality. The deity that lives when watched is both gift and shadow, shaped by our hands, sustained by our hearts, and ever vulnerable to the flicker of a diverted gaze. Let the ritual's echo settle within, and step onward toward the temples of the gaze. They built their sanctuaries not for gods alone, but for worshippers whose eyes would breathe divinity into stone and space. These are the temples of the gaze. Feel the hush that gathers at the threshold of sacred geometry. In ancient Mesopotamia, ziggurats rose in stepped tiers, their broad platforms designed for masses to stand in silent vigil. Each ascent brought eyes closer to sky, turning worshippers into living lenses focused on heaven. High atop the summit, priests awaited in shadowed chambers, guiding the faithful's upward glance with mirrors of polished bronze. Sunlight fractured upon those surfaces, casting a kaleidoscope of light that sparked the god's presence. Sense the heat of the desert sun and the brilliance it conjures in the watcher's hands. In the marble temples of Greece, colonnades formed corridors of sight, rows of pillars drawing the eye toward the cult statue at the innermost sanctuary. Pilgrims walked these aisles in slow procession. Frathers as Ford Mason, Father temples of Greece, their gaze shifting between fluted column and golden image. At the statue's feet, the sculpted form of the deity seemed to breathe, not by its own power, but by the patient focus of every supplicant's stare. Listen to the echo of sandals on cool stone. In Gothic cathedrals, stained glass windows draped walls in colored luminosity. Rose windows spun like celestial wheels, each pane a gemstone of faith. As light poured through, congregants' eyes lifted in wonder, mapping stories in glass and light until the walls themselves seemed alive. Choirs' voices soared, guiding the gaze upward, toward vaults where ribs of stone traced intricate webs, as if the very architecture was a grand soul watching over the faithful. Feel the chord of voices rising. Across the ocean, Mayan pyramids were laid stone by stone to create terraces of sight. On festival days, crowds gathered in the plaza below, eyes fixed upon the summit where priests performed sunlit rituals. As they watched, the pyramid became a living altar, its steps glowing with the weight of expectation. Taste the dust of history on the wind. In the digital age, virtual temples rise in pixel and code websites adorned with looping videos of incense smoke, forums where avatars light candles with a click. Here, worshippers' cursors become ceremonial wands, and each scroll or like feeds the god's algorithmic breath. Hear the hum of servers as modern steeples. Even grand auditoriums transform into temples of the gaze, when screens descend and spotlights paint icons larger than life. 1,000 pairs of eyes converge on one central image, a singer mid-aria, a prophet mid-sermon, a guru mid-meditation. For those moments, the stage is sacred ground, and the audience becomes holy, their sight the sacrament. Feel the electricity crackle in the air. Yet these temples share a common truth. They are not built for gods who stand apart, but for gods who cannot exist without us. Walls and roofs shape the believer's eye, focusing it like a lens on emptiness, waiting for presence to spring forth from absence. Sense the delicate balance of emptiness and expectation. Enter these spaces with humility, for here your gaze wields creation's power. To look is to summon, to avert your eyes, to unmake. Let the weight of that power settle in your heart. And when you leave, know that every wall you passed, every glass pane you traced with your sight, remains only as long as your memory holds it, and only as alive as your willingness to watch again. When the gaze withdraws, the god dissolves into nothingness. In forgotten shrines, oil lamps gutter until their flames vanish, and stone idols sit untouched, their faces erased by shadow. In those moments, worship becomes absence, and absence becomes abyss. The god that once bloomed in light retreats into the silent void, leaving behind only echoes of what was. Imagine a temple chamber stripped of sound, no footsteps on marble, no incense drifting through vaulted ceilings, no murmur of hymns. The air itself feels hollow, as if emptied by a ghost's departure. Here, the walls lean inward, heavy with unmet longing, pressing silence into every corner. Legends tell of deities abandoned by their followers. On a remote Japanese isle, a fisher's shrine stood empty after a great storm swept away the congregation. The carved kami, once vibrant with lacquer, peeled into raw wood, its presence bleeding into the salt wind. Fishermen whispered that the sea itself claimed the god, swallowed by the same currents that took their faith. In medieval Europe, whole dioceses fell silent as plagues swept the land. Cathedrals once thronged with pilgrims stood deserted, their bells rusting on hinges. Stained glass dulled without the candlelight of supplicants. Some said the saints turned away, hearts broken by forgotten songs. Monks left behind diaries filled with pleas unanswered, names that drifted into oblivion like ash on water. The psychic toll is profound. Faithful souls report a hollow ache in their chests, a yearning for the living presence that once answered prayers. They speak of cold mornings when they rise to find prayers unspoken, and with each unspoken word, a small erasure in the soul's memory. The sacred geography of heart and mind crumbles when belief withdraws, exposing a raw emptiness where the divine once resided. Yet the void is not always barren. Some mystics venture into its depths, seeking revelation in the absence of form. They sit in absolute darkness, ears attuned to silence, hearts open to the unmanifest. Here, they listen for the faintest stir of breath beyond breath, the silent pulse of being itself. In that threshold between nothing and everything, they claim to glimpse an undying presence that needs no gaze to exist. But most wanderers fear the void. It is the place where gods vanish and souls forget their own shape. In that space, doubt mutates into despair. If God cannot be seen, does God cease, they ask. And in the hollow reply of emptiness, they confront the fragility of faith. The silent void is both threat and invitation. It reminds us that divinity woven from attention can unravel the moment we look away. Yet it also suggests a paradox. Perhaps true presence lies not in the God we summon, but in the void we fear. In the tension between sight and its absence, we may learn that nothingness itself holds a spark of the divine waiting not for our eyes, but for our willingness to dwell within the silent mystery. As you stand at the edge of that emptiness, listen for the faint resonance that precedes creation. For even in the deepest void, the seed of life endures unseen, unfettered, beyond the reach of gaze. In every ritual, faith becomes an instrumental lens that both reveals and shapes the divine. Consider the scribe who traces sacred symbols on parchment. With each stroke, belief calibrates the ink's flow. The symbols emerge, not simply from hand on page, but from an inner certainty that they carry power. The act of writing measures faith against emptiness, filling the page with presence. In candlelit chapels, worshippers fold their hands in prayer. The precise angle of fingers, the rhythm of kneeling and rising all functional parts of a measurement device. Long silences and sung refrains become scales, weighing the devotion of hearts. A whispered petition is the gram, a fervent acclamation, the kilogram. Each act of faith is a calibration of the divine scale. Across faiths and eras, believers have devised tools of measurement. In Hindu temples, priests use sparsha ritual touch that conveys blessings through palms and fingertips. In Christian liturgy, the Eucharist transforms bread and wine into the body and blood, each element measured by consecration. In Sufi gatherings, the repetitive chanting counts the name of God like beads on a rosary, each repetition building a bridge between human and holy. Yet these instruments are fallible. Doubt infiltrates like a hidden weight, tipping the scales towards silence. Misaligned intentions distort the measurement, conjuring false gods images born of vanity or fear rather than sacred truth. History abounds with icons brought to life by mass attention only to crumble when faith faltered. Images scorched by religious wars, festivals canceled by plagues, congregations silenced under tyranny. The philosopher King Plato spoke of forms living in an unseen realm, accessible only through pure reason. Yet humans lack a compass for certainty. So they forge ritual stools to gauge their own devotion, tools that, by extension, gauge the presence of the divine. Each liturgy, each mantra, each rite of passage becomes an experiment. If we perform these steps, then the God will appear. If not, the God remains spectral. Modern believers measure faith in neural impulses. Neurotheology probes brainwaves as volunteers pray, seeking the loci of spiritual experience. Functional MRI machines illuminate networks firing in moments of transcendence. Scans light up when hymns are sung, when psalms are recited, evidence that the mind tracks the God within. Yet the apparatus itself becomes the altar, and a scientist priest risks reducing mystery to mere data points. Faith as measurement is double-edged. It offers proof of presence when the divine responds to our instruments. But it also invites skepticism. If God only manifests under certain conditions, is God conditional? Does the divine shrink from scrutiny? Or does it reveal itself more fully when we refine our instruments, when we measure not just with hands and machines, but with open hearts? In this calculus of belief, the eternal question arises, are we measuring God, or is God measuring us? Each ritual is a test, each practice an assay. And in the residue of incense ash, in the flicker of candlelight, in the glow of a screen, lies the encrypted answer to whether the God only exists when watched or whether faith itself expands the divine beyond the limits of our measurements. Some souls shatter the covenant between watcher and watch trebles who refuse the God that thrives on attention. In iconoclastic uprisings, waves of destruction washed over sacred images. Byzantine emperors ordered mosaics whitewashed. Protestant reformers smashed stained glass. Each shattered icon was a declaration: we will not give you life with our gaze. But in the very act of destruction, attention turned to that which they sought to erase, granting it a final, defiant breath. Across the desert, Sufi mystics danced whirlwinds known as sema. Spinning with eyes closed, they surrendered sight entirely. Through the radical act of ceasing to watch, they reached ecstasies where no god could be conjured by mere attention, where presence was an inner fire, unbound by spectacle. In 20th century art, John Cage composed a piece of silence, 433 of unplayed music. Audience and performer alike could not look away from the void. In that silence, the music existed only in absence. Cage rebelled against spectacle, suggesting that sound and perhaps God might emerge not from presence but from the spaces between. Digital anarchists build dark web temples where no images are posted, no streams broadcast. Believers gather in forums without profile pictures, sharing whispered texts in encrypted threads. In that sonic vacuum, the divine emerges not in pixels, but in the trust that sustains community when nothing is seen. Literary mavericks craft gods who speak only in absence. Jorge Luis Borges wrote of an invisible deity whose worshippers recite prayers to a name never spoken. Each vow expands the unseen, making God more real in the mind than any image could. The rebellion lies in defying the eye, tracing divinity within the labyrinth of imagination. Rebels of the gaze remind us that devotion need not rely on spectacle. They ask, what if we create presence by looking inward? What if the God we seek exists not on altars or in algorithms, but in the stillness behind our eyes? Their paths are steep and narrow. Turn away from collective rituals, and you may find yourself alone in the dark. But in that darkness, you might also discover a light that transcends all forms, an inner beacon that needs no external witness. Beyond all watching and unwatching lies a realm of pure presence where God exists not as spectacle, but as experience. Close your eyes. Feel the pulse behind your eyelids, a silent drum marking the rhythm of life. In that darkness, the world dissolves. There is no temple, no screen, no sacred text, only your breathing. Here, the divine needs no gaze. It resides in the space between inhales and exhales, in the still point where thought ends. No ritual summons it, no doubt dispels it. Mystics call this state nowness. Zen masters sit in koanless silence, beyond questions and answers. In the simplicity of sitting, they encounter an indescribable presence in neither God nor self, but the convergence of both. In Advaita Vedanta, sages point to the witness consciousness, the silent seer behind every experience. It watches the world's drama without engaging, unmoved by birth or death. It is the God that never needs to be watched, because it is the watcher itself. To awaken the unseen, practices turn inward: breath awareness, silent prayer, open awareness. Each method dissolves the boundary between observer and observed, revealing a unity underlying all dualities. This is the final challenge: to relinquish the need to watch and to surrender to being watched, to trust that the divine presence will fill you, whether or not you call its name. To rest in awareness that is neither bright nor dark, but pure and simple awake. Let go of the canvas and the colors, the rituals and the rites. Let the architectures of belief collapse into the vastness of your own heart. Here, in unfettered presence, the God that only exists when watched reveals its true nature, an eternal witness, boundless and free. And in that unveiling, worship becomes simple. The breath that enfolds you, the silence that surrounds you, the immeasurable pulse of life that carries you onward, awake to the unseen, alive to the unspoken, at one with the divine.